Still here. Emma Payne. There is a shift that happens as we age. It's quiet, subtle, and gradual. It's almost polite in the way it sneaks in, unnoticed. People start making decisions on your behalf. They speak for you instead of to you, and they do things in your best interests. They mean well. Their intentions are honourable. Efficiency replaces curiosity, and along the way, visibility fades. For many older people, especially those living with dementia, the greatest loss is not memory. It is the loss of their choice. It is the slow disappearance of being asked. We focus so heavily on decline that we forget to notice what is being taken away in the name of care. We hurry, we organise, we direct, we assume. And while our intentions may be kind, the impact can quietly diminish dignity. We remove visibility. We take away choice. We forget that the person is still there. When I first started working in aged care, I thought I understood the residents, especially those living with dementia. In my mind, dementia meant memory loss, confusion, repetition, and a decline in basic functioning. I believed my role was to compensate for those losses, to step in and make people feel better. I saw my purpose as bringing joy through music and movement, lifting spirits and brightening what I perceived to be heavy environments. What I didn't yet understand was that people often lose their sense of control, long before they lose their memory. I had spent over a decade running classes and providing entertainment in aged homes and community groups. I facilitated movement and music sessions, music programs and community events across facilities, with over 70,000 interactions with people living with dementia and their loved ones. I saw behind the curtain. I was aware of routines, structure, and the immense pressure on staff to meet requirements. I interacted with residents, staff, and families. I asked questions and learned what mattered most to them. I gave them time, and in return received much more. As I gained experience, I learned to anticipate responses, redirect agitation, and often fill a room with song on instinct. This growth allowed me to create more meaningful moments. I felt good if we made people happy and brought a smile to someone's face. It still brings a tear to my eye when someone who has lost the ability to speak sings quietly during a class. I've shared so many moments in silence when someone holds my hand. Our eyes connect, and we share a moment of understanding. As my experience grew, so did my confidence in seeing past dementia and connecting with the person. I learned that even well-meaning, experienced professionals can quietly erode dignity, simply by moving too quickly. We focus on memory loss, but the true loss goes unnoticed. It's the loss of being asked, too often replaced with being told. The loss of being given time, of being hurried along for the sake of efficiency and making sure that the tasks of care are completed as quickly as possible. My real breakthrough did not happen in a training room or during a presentation. Instead, it happened quietly in our dementia-friendly cafe. When we opened the cafe, we wanted a public place where people were treated with kindness and patience. We had seen how people living with dementia were treated in public places. We had watched partners apologise for their spouse's confusion, adult children speak over their parents, and people hide and feel embarrassed when they sense they were becoming a burden. The cafe was different. It was a place where there was no rush, no judgment, no sideways glances. A place where residents of the aged care home could take 2 hours to drink their coffee, where families could sit in quiet or play board games with each other. More importantly, there was time. Mark and his wife Cheryl were regulars. Mark had advanced dementia. His speech was limited, his responses slow, and his gaze often fixed somewhere just beyond the here and now. Cheryl carried herself with that mixture of devotion and exhaustion I had come to recognise in many long-term carers. Her love for him radiated, even as fatigue clung to her, a weariness no sleep could lift. Mark and Cheryl had spent well over an hour in the cafe. Mark had slowly sipped his coffee, and Cheryl had chatted away, updating him on the family, the mischief the dog had been up to, and sharing photos of the grandchildren, which made Mark smile. When it was time to leave, Cheryl stood and reached for her bag. She turned towards him and said, "Come on, Mark, stand up." He stared ahead. Not resistant, not angry, just unresponsive. "Mark, stand up." There was no change. Her voice tightened slightly. "Mark, we need to go. Stand up." Each repetition seemed to push him further away. His shoulders softened, his expression dulled, and I could see the familiar cycle beginning. Instruction, no response. Repetition, frustration. Cheryl looked at me. Her eyes were not angry, but worn and fragile. She carried the burden of hope and heartbreak, repeating instructions hundreds of times, searching for answers to a mystery she could not solve. I asked quietly if she would like me to help. She nodded. I crouched down beside Mark so that I was level with him, deliberately bringing myself into his line of sight rather than speaking from above. I made eye contact and asked, in a calm and steady tone, whether he had enjoyed his coffee. He looked at me for what felt like an eternity, the kind of silence so thick it aches to be filled. Then, slowly, he nodded. A simple gesture weighted with meaning and hope. That nod was significant. It meant engagement was still possible. I told him that it was time to go back to his room and asked whether he would like me to help him. Again, there was a long pause. And again, he nodded. In that moment, I was reminded of something that has since become so important to my work. Before assistance, there must be engagement. Too often, we give the help we assume someone needs, rather than taking the time to discover what they actually require. We rush the process, and in doing so, we remove choice. I asked him whether he needed help with his arms or his legs. This time there was no extended silence. He pointed to his legs. It was a small gesture, but important. He had communicated a preference. He had identified a need. I confirmed that I would help him with his legs and asked if that was okay. He nodded once more. Trust, I have learned, is rarely built through speed. It is built through patience and clarity. Cheryl watched closely. I could still sense her urgency. She wanted to return him to his room so she could leave. She had likely been on alert all day, anticipating moments like this, but she waited. I explained to Mark exactly what we were going to do. I told him I would hold his hands and that when I counted to 3, he should push his feet firmly into the floor. I explained that when he pushed down, his body would naturally rise. The instruction was deliberate and specific. Stand up requires interpretation, sequencing, and motor planning. Push your feet into the floor is concrete. I held his hands securely and counted slowly. On 3, he pushed, and he stood. It wasn't dramatic or exciting. He just stood. Cheryl's face shifted from surprise to gratitude. She told me she had never seen anyone explain it to him so simply, her voice trembling with relief and renewed hope. Her comment made me think, why do we overcomplicate things? Why do we not choose our words more carefully? How often do we give too many instructions and assume that the receiver knows what we are thinking? I explained gently that as dementia develops, phrases like stand up or sit down can become too vague. Instead of saying sit down, we might guide someone to bend their knees and lower their body toward the chair. The action is the same, but the instruction is clearer. I thanked Cheryl for letting me help. I hugged Mark and told him, what a team. I reassured him and encouraged him to go with Cheryl back to his room. I share this story in every presentation and training. It marks the shift in my purpose, from designing programs facilitating activities, and increasing participation, to protecting dignity and supporting choice. We often hear that dementia erases or robs us of the person. We try to communicate in the same way we always have. And when our communication is not understood, we say the person's behaviour has changed. I've worked in facilities with designated areas for people with behaviours. What we often fail to understand is that for the person living with dementia, the behaviour is the new form of communication. What happened in our cafe with Mark was not a miracle, and he did not stand because I lifted him. He stood because he was given clear, manageable steps and the time he needed to respond. This event created a shift in me. I began to notice how often people in aged care homes, especially those living with dementia, have their choices ignored in the name of efficiency. Older people are spoken to in directives and given instructions, and they feel as though they have no choice. They feel invisible. I started to pay closer attention to language. I slowed down conversations. I gave space for longer pauses. I educated families and staff about breaking tasks into steps. About waiting. Invisibility became clearer. People started telling me how frustrated they felt, that their voices don't matter. Mark was still there. The way he communicated had changed. The time he needed to hear, to comprehend, and to act had slowed down, but he was still there. That afternoon in the cafe marked a quiet reinvention for me. I stopped measuring success by how smoothly sessions ran and began focusing on how much choice was preserved. Instead of asking, did they participate? I asked, were they respected? I've learnt that resilience is not pushing through decline. It is meeting people without diminishing who they are. It is crouching instead of standing over, replacing urgency with clarity, and believing that when language falters, the person remains. Mark standing that day was not the story's focus. The key was that he was asked, given time, and chose. Once you witness how much dignity can be restored by changing a simple sentence, you realise the importance of respecting people's choices and never rushing them through their lives. You slow down. You enter their world. Aging does not make someone less human. Dementia does not erase identity. Needing support does not cancel the right to choose. Visibility is not about being loud or independent. Sometimes it's about being acknowledged in a pause, being looked at, not over, being asked, not instructed. We cannot always restore memory. We cannot reverse disease, but we can protect dignity. We can preserve choice in the smallest of moments. We can crouch down. We can wait. We can ask. And when we do, something powerful happens. The person in front of us is no longer a task to complete or a problem to solve. They are a human being with history, preference, emotion, and agency. Not invisible, not erased, not diminished. Still here.